The New Orleans Pelicans are a weird team. Yes, they were one of the bottom teams last year, but I look at this roster and I actually don't hate it. It's tough to rank where this team will exactly lie because of how tough the Western Conference is, but they have a few high-level players and some decent guys to come off the bench as well. On the other hand, they had a less than ideal free agency, one of the more disastrous draft day trades in recent NBA history, and now they're relying on Zion Williamson of all people to take a leap. Welcome to 30 Teams in 30 Days, let's get into the New Orleans Pelicans. New Orleans Pelicans did have one of the worst drafts in the league in my opinion, but it did start off pretty well, drafting Jeremiah Fears with the 7th overall pick. Fears is described as a gym rat possessing elite leadership skills and having the perfect mentality for the NBA. Despite not being the biggest guy in the world and not the greatest shooter, he is a pretty polished two-way player who is an excellent playmaker and scorer during his time at Oklahoma. And after picking Fears, the Pelicans would find themselves on the draft board sooner than initially expected as they traded up from the 23rd to the 13th spot. At that spot, they moved up 10 picks by trading a future 2026 Milwaukee Bucks or Pelicans draft pick unprotected. The Atlanta Hawks are gonna get the draft pick of whichever one of those teams ends up being worse, but surely they did that for a guy who is an elite talent, right? Well, not so much. I'm honestly having trouble deciding if I like Derek Queen or not. He did have a good summer league as he averaged 14 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block per game. However, a torn ligament in his wrist is going to take him out for 3 months. Hopefully he'll be back in time for the regular season. As far as his skill set goes, Queen is a classic center talent. He has a strong back-to-basket game while having the face-up game to counter that and being a pretty good passer as well. However, on the other hand, he wasn't a great rim protector. He doesn't exactly have an elite wingspan for the NBA, and he is just barely 6'10". He isn't much of a shooter at all, and he's not exactly athletic enough to be a forward, making him a bit of an undersized center with a skill set that isn't exactly asked for in the modern day NBA. From a pure talent standpoint, I did see a lot of scouts put him in the top 10 to top 15 picks, but it's just a matter of if his game is going to translate into what the Pelicans need. In my opinion, I think the Pelicans knocked it out of the park with the first pick, but the second one with Derek Queen might be a potential miss. Time is only going to tell. But this wasn't the only news of the offseason for the Pelicans. One of the biggest moves that they made was changing up Zion Williamson's contract. About 2 weeks ago, Joe Dumars and the rest of the Pelicans guaranteed the 2025 through 26 contract for Zion Williamson. If you didn't know, Zion Williamson was on a non-guaranteed contract through the 2028 season. He would only get fully paid if he made his weigh-ins throughout the season by weighing under a certain weight, and he would only get paid if he would play 41, 51, and 61 games respectively. This was a good deal for the Pelicans. They get the upside of a healthy Zion or the ability to not pay him and even be able to cut him for a cheaper cost if his weight and health stayed an issue. But for the upcoming season, that's not going to be an option for New Orleans. 2027 and 2028 is still non-guaranteed for Zion, so he is still going to have to prove himself this season, but I am confident that he's going to remain a Pelican for this upcoming year because of that fully guaranteed contract. A fully guaranteed Zion absolutely kills his own trade value. Many teams are skeptical of Zion due to his health, but the Pelicans were clearly not one of those teams. GM Joe Dumars is committed to Zion and stating that the Pelicans want him to be the centerpiece of the franchise, but the two-time All-Star only played 30 games last season. Of course, it was a good 30 games. He's averaged about 24 points per game in about 28 minutes. That's one of the most efficient marks that I've ever seen a player score from. But nonetheless, he still only lasted for 30 games. He's only played 130 games in the last 3 seasons. One thing you could say about Zion Williamson is that he tends to have an unhealthy year followed up by a healthy season. So given last year was an unhealthy Zion, we might see the same pattern repeat and we see Zion play 60 plus games this season. Williamson may not be the league-changing talent that we all thought he was going to be, but he is still an all-star caliber player who could probably be the number 2 on a really high-level team, and he is still one of the most dominant and strongest players in the league. I personally still really enjoy watching him, and I really want to see him remain healthy, and I want to see what he is fully capable of, and clearly the Pelicans want that too. And one of the other major moves of the offseason for the Pelicans included sending CJ McCollum and Kelly Olynyk to the Washington Wizards for Jordan Poole and Saddiq Bey. On the surface, and for the most part, this is a trade that I actually really like. Poole is arguably a slightly better player, at least according to his advanced stats, while he is also 8 years younger than McCollum. While Poole did also emerge as a bit of a leader in Washington, he hasn't played winning basketball in years ever since leaving Golden State. Jordan Poole's contract also expires 1 year later than CJ McCollum's, which was set to expire this season. So now the Pelicans are stuck paying $30+ million to a smaller shooting guard who may not be able to do a whole lot else. But the other part of this trade involved bringing in Saddiq Bey. Bey is 26 years old and missed the entire previous season due to an ACL tear. When we last saw him, he wasn't exactly a bad player. The last year he played, he averaged 14 points and 6 rebounds, and he has a career 55% true shooting percentage. It's tough to say exactly what Bey is going to look like because it's been a while since we've seen him play, but he's definitely a good rotational player to be coming off of the bench. Certainly, I would take him over a guy like Kelly Olynyk. So with 2 new rookies, a younger scoring level guard, and possibly a reinvigorated Zion Williamson, what does the rest of this Pelicans roster look like? One of the key additions made was Kevon Looney. Looney was a surprising loss for the Warriors this offseason, but in my opinion, he is a big addition for the Pelicans. He's always played a bit of a smaller role, but the center has always been an efficient player, being a solid defender, rebounder, and screener for the Dubs. He was a key player in winning 3 championships in his 10-year time in the Bay. Looney is expected to start or at least split minutes with last year's starter, Yves Missi. Missi is coming off an incredibly solid rookie season where the 21-year-old averaged 9 points and 8 rebounds per game. Like Looney, Missi doesn't have much of a jumper, but he is also a good screener, rebounder, and defensive player. He is someone that I expect to see more minutes in this upcoming season, but even if he doesn't turn out for the Pelicans, I still believe in him given the fact that he has a 3-time champion to mentor him. And another younger star-level player for the Pelicans is Trey Murphy III. Murphy is coming off of an absolute breakout season, averaging 21 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists on 38% from 3 on 8 attempts per game. In his 53 games played, Murphy exploded, averaging 6 more points per game with an above-average PER. He also bettered himself as a 3-level scorer while being a 40% catch-and-shoot 3-point shooter while shooting 70% from the restricted area, and he did all of this while averaging 1 more whole assist per game. And Trey Murphy, I'm really expecting to continue this growth throughout this upcoming season. Captaining the helm of this team should be DeJounte Murray. Last year, in his first year for the Pelicans, Murray averaged 17 points, 6 rebounds, and 8 assists. While Murray is one of the more forgotten about and underrated players in the league, this year in New Orleans got cut short. It was already his lowest scoring total in 4 years, and his efficiency majorly dipped, but things were even worse for him when he tore his Achilles in late January against the Boston Celtics. DeJounte is only 29, and even though Achilles injuries are a rising occurrence in the NBA, we are also seeing more players having the possibility of coming back from them, and I hope DeJounte Murray can be another one of those comeback stories. For the sake of his health and for his career, I kinda hope that we see him come back either very late or not at all for the season, giving him the most time to recover, as that is very important for Achilles injuries. And someone I'm expecting to play in his place is Jose Alvarado. Alvarado is one of my favorite backup players in the league, and pound for pound, he is probably one of the better defenders in the entire league. He did slightly better on offense as well last season, doubling his assists from the year prior, averaging nearly 5 assists and a career-high 10 points per game. His efficiency certainly does need to be worked on, but Alvarado is one of the better backup players in the league, but I do think his starting role is a little too big for him. And there are 2 more wings I want to talk about that are coming off the bench. The first one is Brandon Boston Jr. He had a solid season in New Orleans, averaging 11, 3, and 2 for the year. He's going to be just 24 years old, and we're going to have to see if there's going to be any major development from him, but he's already taken steps both defensively and from 3. And the last player is someone similar to Brandon Boston Jr., but that is Herb Jones. Jones is one of the better defending forwards in the entire NBA. In 2024, he was 5th in Defensive Player of the Year voting, being on the All-Defensive First Team. In 2025, he did struggle, playing just 20 games as he did tear his rotator cuff in his shoulder, so I'm going to be curious to see how well he bounces back and to see if he could return to that 2024 form. I think the Pelicans could play both of these guys, but depending on the kind of roster that they want, it's going to probably come down between Trey Murphy III and Herb Jones for that starting position. Even though we've seen Jones start more, I kind of hope that they lean towards the younger side, especially with no DeJounte Murray, and give Trey Murphy a few more minutes. Like I said, the Pelicans don't have an awful roster. If they were in the East, I would call this at the very least a play-in team, but this year they're probably still going to be in that bottom 6-7 part of the Western Conference. But just because you're not one of the top teams in the league doesn't mean that you aren't still an interesting team to watch, and I think the Pelicans really fall in that line. A lot of their guys are either in their mid-20s or younger, so there is still some potential room for upside. Of course, Zion Williamson is always going to be someone who's talked about, and this year is going to be a big season for him. Obviously, the Pelicans are putting their trust in him, and they've been burned by him so many times before. I can't imagine that they're going to do it again if it happens this year, and I can't help but feel bad for Pelicans fans in some sort of way with the whole Zion situation. He was one of the most hyped prospects of all time and a guy who was supposed to save your franchise, and now you barely even get to see him on the courts. I understand why it would be hard to want to see him go. But Zion Williamson or not, I am really curious to see how this team turns, and I really am curious to see what's going to happen to Jordan Poole and to see if he can get some chemistry playing with an old teammate in Kevon Looney and some great shooters that the Pelicans have. This has been 30 and 30. If you liked the video, you know what to do, and I will catch you all next time.